Seymour Hersh on Democracy Now! Says Obama cherry-picked in the intelligence for planned U.S. airstrikes in Syria. And I'll go back to that article. NATO's war on Syria just got dirtier as the West scrambles to cover up the Syria false flag revelations, says Pulitzer Prize winner, and Syria's electronic army exposed all. I'm not sure about that, but I sometimes wonder if that's actually coming out of Tel Aviv, the Syria's electronic army, or possibly out of Russia. But this is just a video here. He goes on, it's like 42 minutes, and it's on antiwar.com, a good website to check out if you want to watch the whole thing. He said Barack Obama did not tell the whole story this autumn when he tried to make the case that Assad was responsible for the chemical weapons attack near Damascus on the 21st of August. In some instances, he omitted important intelligence, and in others, he presented assumptions as facts, which, like Bush did and all the others, right? Most significant, he failed to acknowledge something known to the U.S. intelligence community, that the Syrian army is not the only party in the country's civil war with access to sarin, the nerve agent that a UN study concluded, without assessing responsibility, had been used in the rocket attack. So I like how it's at the bottom. Months before the attack, American intelligence agencies produced a highly classified report. It says here that preceding a ground invasion, they said that Al-Nusra Front, a jihadi group affiliated with Al-Qaeda, has mastered the mechanics of creating sarin and was capable of manufacturing it in quantity. They covered that extensively, right? And that they were actually being aided. In some cases, the opposition was by Britain and them, and by the same agencies doing this report. When the attack occurred, Al-Nusra should have been suspect, but the administration cherry-picked intelligence to justify a strike against Assad. Hersh has now warned the public of both a conspiracy by the West to use terrorists to overthrow the sovereign government of Syria, which has unfolded exactly as predicted years ago, as well as the use of chemical weapons. He's also exposed a systematic manner in which the West has lied about the August 21st gas attack in Damascus. Actually, I did that too. I put all different articles together, and I tried to just ram that case home. I think it was pretty obvious to most of you guys that view these reports. But it doesn't really matter if he's someone that's famous, that's out there, just like when he was talking about Iran, or talking about Iraq and Iran. People tend to listen, so it's kind of like, in that sense, it's kind of a group effort, I guess. U.S. officials are preparing to destroy the Syrian chemical weapons at sea. If all goes according to plan, I covered this before, but the bulk of Syria's chemical weapons stocks could be destroyed early next year inside the specially modified hold of a U.S. ship somewhere at sea. But it says here they're going to be eliminated miles away from any port under the supervision of U.S. trained technicians in protective suits. So after all this, we're talking about they may not actually have the money to do this. Syria's chemical weapons mission may be delayed. The deadline to get most of the materials out of Syria will be quite difficult to meet, says the disarmament organization. So, yeah, they said, well, they won a Nobel Peace Prize. They didn't even really do anything yet. And that's what kind of point, I don't know if this was a win or not. Like I said, for me, time will tell whether this was actually a legitimately good thing for Syria. Because when I see, I remember seeing articles about Assad asking for transport trucks security to basically get these chemical weapons out of the country and towards this port, Latakia, I believe. But it's like I said before, by them giving up their weapons, they're admitting that they did it. Those specific attacks that they were being accused of. Well, we know that there was the rebels or the opposition or the Al-Qaeda elements inside that were doing that. U.S. rejects the Assad offer to fight Al-Qaeda in return for staying in power. So he's already been fighting Al-Qaeda. I don't know why he'd say this unless he really thinks that they're going to pull him out of there. But I thought, if they really wanted Assad gone, he probably would be dead already. So, and like I've covered before in different reports, that and to a certain degree, the White House or intelligence elements, they're not really for regime change as much anymore. Because the Al-Qaeda elements are getting so bad. But suppose the Americans rejected an offer by the Syrian government or regime to fight al-Qaeda and the jihadists in the country in return for staying in power in Damascus. So this is the Prime Minister of the Syrian National Coalition of the opposition. He said that the Americans told them about the offer. The U.S., he claimed, put the blame for the increase in al-Qaeda activity in the country firmly on the Assad government. He also denied any U.S.-Russian deal at the expense of the coalition, despite the agreement of the both to destroy the stock of chemical weapons. So the opposition definitely has an incentive to have regime change carried out. So they want to get rid of the Assad government and that. So they said that, talking about the Geneva talks, they said that the group is not going to negotiate with the regime. They will not accept any deal that keeps Assad in power. They will not deal with extremists who are fighting the regime. It says we have contact with groups which are described as being moderate. So this is interesting because just recently we covered this. Syria rebels and jihadists in truce as Assad seeks ceasefire. So is this really true? But neither the armed opposition nor the regime is capable of defeating the other side. That was in September. What I was originally going to point to was from December 3rd. Syrian rebels considered joining forces. It's even gotten to the point where these, where the opposition rebels are fighting the al-Qaeda extremists. If I'm sure there's a difference. I'm sure it's more complicated on the ground, but remember I just covered this. Syrian rebels consider joining forces with regime troops to fight al-Qaeda. Because why? Al-Qaeda has taken control of large areas of these rebel-held territories. So it could be that these rebels, these opposition forces, could have been kind of used as dupes, whatever, and to get regime change. And then it didn't work out, and they're starting to realize that maybe this wasn't a good idea because now they're taking our homes. Syria's opposition leader is going to visit Russia. The Syrian opposition leader said in Kuwait on Monday that he would visit Russia at Moscow's invitation. It says here, I don't know if they just keep pushing this narrative, but it says here Moscow has remained one of the most stubborn supporters of the regime of Assad. I know some may disagree with me, but I'm not really sure if they're staunch supporters of Assad government. I think they can care less whether he stays or goes. So they're keeping, you want this transitional government there, kind of like in Libya, and that's probably what it will turn out to be, like a Libya. And so they're keeping Assad in there as long as he's keeping the terrorists at bay. And they remove these chemical weapons from the country. And it's a good possibility they'll just let them kill each other, Shiites and Sunnis. But the one thing it is creating a lot of is refugees. Mass murder in the Middle, and that's what I'll talk about in my last video, my fourth one. Mass murder in the Middle East is founded too, but funded by our friends the Saudis. Everyone knows where al-Qaeda gets its money, but while the violence is sectarian, the West does nothing. Basically, it goes on and says, all the supposed determination of the U.S. and its allies since 9/11 to fight the war on terror. They showed astonishing restraint when it comes to pressuring Saudi Arabia and the Gulf monarchies to turn off the financial tap that keeps jihadists in business. A 9/11 link has been made to Saudi Arabia, which most of you are probably already aware, is the topic of a 28 redacted pages in a government report. The congressman are pushing for a release. Most of the victims and people in general want to know the relationship between the 19 hijackers, 50 of them Saudi nationals, and the Saudi and Arabian government. Or the dancing Israelis, right? Taking footage of it. I like what they say here. These two congressmen, Republican and Democrat, were given access to the redacted pages of the Joint Intelligence Committee inquiry of 9/11 in 2002. I was absolutely shocked by what I read. So what was so surprising was those whom we thought we could trust really disappointed me. You think? Damascus, Saudi regime responsible for shedding Syria blood. The Syrian foreign minister said that Saudi Arabia, the regime of Saudi Arabia, is interfering blatantly in Syria's internal affairs, continuing to arm terrorist groups in Syria, and that this support isn't limited to sending weapons to terrorists in Syria. They've provided funding, logistics support to armed groups, in addition to recruiting extremist terrorists by Saudi intelligence and sending them to Syria. So, noting that these terrorists, including prisoners of various nationalities who are held in Saudi prisons. I'm talking about the Gulf monarchies. Kuwait Emir opens Gulf Summit with a call to end the Syrian war. He also supported the nuclear agreement between Iran and the world powers. So, yeah, they're talking about the new American attitude towards Iran. But although many of the Gulf countries viewed the nuclear agreement as positive, Saudi Arabia revealed surging rage as a concern that the Iranian-American agreement may weaken its role in the region. It's like I said before, what do they have to offer, right? And here you go. The augmenting strategic role of Iran in the region and the decline of the American dependence on the Gulf sources of energy intensify the concerns of the GCC states. So that is the big key, right? Analysts emphasize that the Gulf Union was proposed to compensate their strategic losses, yet Oman's threat of withdrawing from the Council tackled the proposal and deepened the rift among the states, so they're having their own little internal conflicts. Qatar's concerns about being subjected to the Saudi influence also represented a main obstacle facing the Union. Economically, the disputes between Saudi Arabia and the UAE thwarted efforts to establish the custom union. They want to create their own army and military force and all this stuff. Okay, so with U.S. ties frayed, Saudi calls for Gulf Union. We're talking about Saudi Arabia basically kicked to the curb, odd man out, or third wheel lately. With its decades-old U.S. alliance strained over the Syria war and nuclear deal with Iran, Saudi Arabia is calling on the Gulf monarchies to unite for their own self-defense. Chuck Hagel of the U.S. Pentagon has assured Gulf states that the agreement struck between the major powers and Iran in November will not affect the presence of some 35,000 U.S. troops in the region. In Bahrain, Saudi Assistant Foreign Minister said Gulf countries should no longer depend on others to ensure their safety. So here you go. This is kind of reiterating what I was just saying. The oil-rich monarchies must unite under one political entity in order to face internal and external challenges. The internal is, uprisings. These are the places where they're like, when there's protesters, they get mowed down with bullets, and it's not even covered in Western media, so like when that media machine grinds up, dude, and gets winded, dude, and the big spotlight goes on Bahrain and stuff and Saudi Arabia, they'll get the American people who should have already known about what was going on, but turned a blind eye, right, instead to watch like CSI, whatever. They said all countries have realized that blind dependence on a foreign power is no longer acceptable. So, altogether, they hold 40% of the world's oil reserves and a quarter of its natural gas. Yemen looks to become a GCC member, so I don't know if that's going to really happen because they're having their own internal issues with the South trying to create their own autonomous state. But they are in the region, they are players. So, a U.S. drone strike kills 4 in southern Yemen. It destroyed a truck and killing 4 identified people. The Yemeni officials dubbed the slain al-Qaeda suspects, though they conceded they have no idea who the 4 victims of the attack actually are, since the bodies were burned beyond recognition. Bahrain says schizophrenic U.S. foreign policy is pushing Arab states towards Russia. Their approach to the Middle East could result in many key Arab states deciding to align themselves more closely with Russia. Remember we covered this December 10th, Turkey joining SCO? Well, they're actually covering in the Russian media, taking it serious. No surprise if you've been paying attention, but the U.S. is in economic decline as China and Russia are moving away from the U.S. dollar. The analysts criticize American news media for not telling the truth about the economic situation, which is in the few coming months, a desperate situation will basically come to the forefront. So they're basically going to keep lying to them, telling them everything's all right. And you shouldn't need a study or experts or scientists to tell you this, but a U.S.-Russian nuclear war will end the human race. He says it's not certain, but possible. He says, in this kind of war, biologically, there are going to be people surviving somewhere on the planet, but the chaos that would result from this will dwarf anything ever seen. The ecological consequences would be, 1, firestorms caused by this type of war would send tons of soot, millions of tons of soot in the atmosphere, blocking out the sunlight and dropping temperatures across the planet. This is GGN, and I'm Darko. Thank you.